we got a whole new setup here for the live stream. I'm going to ask this probably every single time I live stream, but what do we think about this audio quality? Can you hear the vocals? Can you hear me talking? Can you hear the banjo? Anything amiss? I can do louder if need be. How's it going, Finn? Hi, Richard. Hi, Chris. Molly and Tenbrooks. Yeah, that's a great one, man. That's really good. I like that a lot. Um, Actually, which Molly and Tenbrooks is it the JD Crowe one from the album band one, or is it the uh, or the Earl one? Both of those are actually very cool. I can't tell which one I like more. Good. Okay, that's great. Glad to hear that. Yeah, I'd like to be able to do these maybe every week. Um, I think Saturdays are a good day for me. Um, and this is a good time for me. The Earl one. Okay, cool. Great. Scruggs Licks. You mean the one I was just playing just now, or some other time? Just now is just kind of random stuff. Yeah, don't really have anything in particular. But yeah, it's an interesting thing about Scruggs Licks is if you hear Scruggs play them, it's sounds very traditional because that's the deal. But if you hear like Ron Stewart play the same things, it sounds very modern. So I think maybe if it sounded modern, it might have something to do with just the people that I listen to. I'm listening to slightly more modern people, even though it's all the same, stuff. Things like the way somebody accents, like let's say I was gonna get to this. There's something about the way modern banjo players play that they really land on that last note a little stronger. You know, and the way the hammer-ons just a little extra. Everything's a little bit. Everything's just a little more accentuated. Which I don't know how that happened or why that didn't happen before or what the deal. I think might have something to do with the way banjos sound now, recording quality, the way banjos are set up. I mean, the way Earl had his banjo set up back in the day, you probably couldn't really easily do, quite so, dug in like that. So there's something there. All right, let's try and get through all these. We got some questions building up. 5x5. I don't know 5x5. Is that a? I don't know whose tune that is. Old Dangerfield. That's a good one. Chris, maybe I think you might have been the one that was asking for the version of Old Dangerfield that Allison, what's that? Allison, Kristen Scott Benson does. I'll get to that. I think at some point. I'm doing a little bit different types of lessons now, so I don't know how long it'll be until I get there. Oh, I am coming through 5x5. I get what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't understand that either. What is coming through 5x5? Hopefully that's a good thing, but I don't know what that means either. All right. When do you? Okay, Keith says, when do you decide to change a bridge? So it's a little bit up in the air whether or not bridges get like worn out. Depending on the way your banjo's set up, sometimes you'll get a bridge that will like really have a quite a dip in it just from over the years or over however much time it is. It'll kind of get warped. That's probably not great, but it has probably more to do with the way that the strings are over the neck. The action of each string and having control over that. I don't know if it makes a huge difference on the sound. Having a bridge on there a long time, it might. It's just something I don't really know, but it's probably worth changing your bridge, just to experiment with other bridges. It's amazing how much that changes the sound of an instrument, almost more than anything else sometimes. It almost makes it a completely different banjo, having a different height or different thickness. Or I really don't know enough about it, but I know that experimenting with different bridges is a great way to change your sound. Um, Finn says, my banjo has been sounding sort of dull lately. It has fresh strings and all, but when I got it, so much better. It's kind of quiet, especially fifth string sounds slightly muted. So this kind of gets into general banjo setup stuff, which I'm not an expert on, but I can, mess around here a little bit here and there. There are a couple things that might have an effect on that. The overall, that really has to do with the overall setup of the banjo. So the things that are movable pieces, in general, the head tension, the tailpiece height, the neck bow, meaning the truss rod, coordinator rods, all that stuff you can move around. The easy things to mess around with would be the head tension. That's a huge thing. So it's possible, maybe when you got your banjo, try this. Try and hit the head of the banjo. I wonder if this comes through on the mic. It might or might not. I can hear a pretty clear G sharp. You don't need to hear exactly what that note is, but if you do that and you hear that it's actually like a really dull sound and it's really kind of boomy dull, it's possible you just need to tighten the head. And if you're not, if you're not used to that, then you probably want to talk to somebody who has some experience with that. It's not hard to do, and actually you can learn it on YouTube. I learned how to do it on YouTube, and I learned better from other friends that I have. But you can do that. That's a huge thing. So many banjos end up sounding more dull than they need to, because they just kind of slowly degrade into this like state of being not so set up anymore. So maybe my official recommendation, here's a long walk for now, what's the short answer to this thing, is you should probably take it to someone who understands banjos pretty well and see if they can do something to set it up. If you can get around Gabe Hirschfeld or just some like local banjo player that does their own setup work, they'll be able to do something to it, even if it's not the absolute most perfect thing that can happen to it. That'll be a good thing to do. All right, we're coming down the line here. Any particular bridge I prefer? I have not tried nearly enough bridges. I need to try a lot more, actually. But I have a Richie Dotson bridge, which is great. Charlie Cushman has great bridges. Silvio Ferretti has great bridges. Yeah, those are kind of the big ones that I hear about all the time from my favorite players and people and everything. But that's the challenge here, is that every banjo sounds very different. Every bridge is going to affect each banjo differently. So one bridge that you hate on one banjo might sound perfect on another one. So it's really more about just trying a bunch of different things if you can. One thing I like to do is try a bunch of bridges that a friend has or something. I don't need to buy a bunch of stuff, but just put on a bunch of bridges and see how they work, and then maybe decide if I want to buy one of those bridges. Even that's challenging, though, because different bridges from the same person can be very different as well. Hard to win in that situation. Teardrop backup beyond just a straight. I don't know if I know what you mean by teardrop, like pathway of teardrops, or I'm not sure I know what you mean. And by the bar shape, do you mean like the that kind of thing, maybe. You know, there's more of that kind of thing. Maybe is what you're talking about. If that's what you're talking about, then we have something that I can talk about. But I don't want to get into it without knowing if that's what I mean. Maddie says, "Hey, Maddie, what's up?" Says, "What are a couple kickoffs I should learn to work on playing out of C and D?" The first ones I learned were Toy Heart from the first Bluegrass Album Band record. It's been a while since I did that one, but what is that? How does it even go? Who even knows? Of course, that does the tune down to C, but that's a good one, which is on. I put on YouTube, and you can get the tab. That's one of the free tabs ones, so you can find that. C, also learning any of the Scruggs tunes that are out of a C position, like Home Sweet Home, can be very helpful. Even though it's not really a kickoff per se, it just gets you used to those positions. For D, well, this isn't maybe what you mean. I mean, maybe if you did like what's that one? That on the Boxcars record? That's probably not what you mean. But trying to think of any. I mean, there's also Chalk Up Another One from the first Bluegrass Album Band record is a kickoff in the D position, which is also on YouTube. It's like an F, but I think it's out of a D. You know. That's a good one, actually. So that's at a D position. I should do more lessons on kickoffs out of those positions, because the only way that I know how to play those is just so much trial and error, and kind of trying to figure it out on my own, which is just that's the long way around. The better way to do that is to learn a bunch of kickoffs and stuff in those positions, which I did not do. So something to add to the lessons. Let's see. Slow song. Okay, so Rob means slow songs. Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple different ways to think of, a couple different options for what is possible on a slow song, and kind of it depends on what kind of song it is, but it also depends on like how fast it is or something. So let's say, when I think some songs were Ocean of Diamonds, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so we can kind of talk about all that. Well, one quick first thing you can do, all that like up the neck backup stuff that we do on faster song. That's on the up the neck backup lesson that I put up on YouTube. You can do that all that at slow tempos, and it actually sounds great. That's kind of more like what Ralph Stanley did. If you listen to Stone Walls and Steel Bars, the whole thing kind of starts out of 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You know what I mean? So there's that. But one thing I really like is just kind of this alternating thumb and fingers technique where so it's using all the same positions, but it's usually just using that alternating pattern right there. And there isn't a huge science to what order to alternate them in. I can do kind of double thumb and then double with the fingers or whatever. It's kind of it's something you're gonna have to kind of work out for yourself what you like, because you listen to 5 different banjo players and you listen to 5 different ways of doing that. But here's the other thing: you don't even have to do just all 3 notes. you can do the two outside notes. You know what I mean? B and G. Which then we get into basically the same kind of thing we're talking about with this bar. It's kind of the same thing. And you can do it all the way up and down that scale. Here's what's interesting about all this backup stuff. You can get into interesting chord shapes. You can get into single string stuff. You can get all kinds of things. But most of the backup that you hear deals with only a few techniques, but being really flexible across the neck. So let's say I'm going to do just G, C, D. I can do... That's all well and good. But the key to actually making that sound more interesting or more varied is really just being able to move across the entire scale with those patterns. You know, once you can do that, you can actually move between these patterns, because from G to C, there's actually, you know, and just doing that triplet alternating. And I know that might not just immediately jump out as like, oh, of course, then I'll just do exactly that. But it kind of outlines that there's some steps between the just basic stuff and that thing. There's some other things that need to put that in context, meaning, and here are what those things are. These position chords up the entire neck. You know, you're going to want to know those. You're going to want to have some confidence with like rhythmic, you know, just the right hand stuff. That's a kind of a pattern right there that works on its own. Thumb, thumb, you know, double thumb, double middle finger. Whatever that is. And sometimes it's because you learned like what the actual pattern is that somebody else did, and sometimes it's because, okay, I need to play 2 measures of this, and then I need to somehow get to the next chord. I have this much time. How much can I fit in between that amount of, you know, whatever I mean. It's like one of those math equations, but and having this sense of landing in a place that's very intentional, because you could just move all the way around. That was fine, but it doesn't really sound like I was on my way to C nearly as much as that really sounds like I landed somewhere. So also having this sense of knowing where you want to land. But this is all getting into enough explanation and stuff that's not going to, I mean, it works on the live stream for people that kind of already get it, but if you don't get it yet, then this is the kind of thing you might want to see in a video, which is telling me that I should probably be making a video about this. So I will. There you go. Oh right, and the bluesy J.D. Crowe bend licks. So what's cool about those licks is they kind of all happen in like one type of position. So let's say you're in this, call it the F shape, G chord, and all you got to do to play all this stuff, it's just 3 and 5 on all 4 strings, right? And then on the 3rd and 2nd strings, you're going to be bending on the 5th fret. We could go on and on and on about what it is about that makes that work, or other places to do it on the neck. You know, you can play, this is the G minor pentatonic scale, or actually it's not. It's like the G minor 6 pentatonic, or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. But we could play that. could play that everywhere. But actually, that's not what J.D. Crowe does. And if he did, it would be kind of, I don't know, it'd be a little weird, you know? It sounds fine. But this is just so, this position, this one position is so definitively... So you can kind of experiment with that. And what he would do is, like, let's say, Ocean of Diamonds. Then he would do, in each position, in each chord, G, C, and D, he would do the same kind of patterns. And then when it went to G, same with D. So as long as you get comfortable with that position, that 3-5, and think about it as being there. And then the rest of it is this combination between that little scale, if you want to call it that. Just that as a scale, and then this chord position. You know, hopefully that's visible enough for you. So, as you're going up and down the scale, be mindful of the fact that you're actually playing a song in a major key for the most part with this stuff, which means that major third, you know, when you do, the one that's in my mind right now for some reason is Sitting Alone in the Moonlight. It is still a major sound. You know, it's not... It is major. So even though you're going to go around in this kind of bluesy minor sounding thing, it can be helpful to accent that third, right? It's kind of like this, like... You get both sides of that. It's another thing to do a lesson on, probably. Let's see. What make and model is your banjo, and is the only one you have in play? So it's a 30s Gibson TB11 conversion, meaning it was a TB11 tenor banjo, and it was converted to a 5-string. So Frank Neat made the neck, and then 11s don't have tone rings, so actually it's been cut for a tone ring, and it has a Blaylock tone ring in it now. That might be kind of all the information. And it is the only banjo that I have in play. I've had other banjos. I had a Gold Star up for a while that I sold eventually because I just never played it. So that's worth checking out. Gold Stars are very cool. But yeah, this is the only banjo that I play. And it was recently set up by Gabe Hirschfeld, and it sounds great now. It did not for a while, and now it does again, so I'm very happy with it. So if you're in the New England area, check out Gabe Hirschfeld for banjo setups. Maddie says, thanks, Eli. I'll check this. And Maddie, if I could think of other ones, then I'll let you know. There is a million, and I haven't learned many of them. What I find a lot of the time is that there are great kickoffs in C and D for any bands with women singers. So now that I think of that, there's ones that I haven't learned, but that I've been listening to lately, like Dale Ann Bradley's got a gospel album called Send the Angels, which I think has good kickoffs out of C and D, maybe. Tina Adair has... Ooh, this is a good one. I haven't learned this, but this is a really good one. Tina Adair's first record has Charlie Cushman playing When My Time Comes to Go out of a D position. And that's like crazy fast. Not crazy fast, but a crazy fast for a D position, and it's a really good one. And he plays a really good second break on that too, like all the way up here. All kinds of stuff, which is very cool. That's probably what I would check out. Okay. I should mention, by the way, while we have a little lull in the questions, that if you want to watch this live stream after it's over, because once it's over, you'll no longer be able to watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on Patreon.com if you become a supporter there. And also, if you're not currently subscribed to this YouTube channel, then you should subscribe now so that you get notifications whenever I do this sort of stuff. And I'm trying something else out too, that might be kind of fun, might be kind of stupid. I think if somebody subscribes while I'm doing this live stream, then there will be a little notification that will come up on the screen. I think it'll be over here, and it'll say so-and-so has subscribed. There'll be a little noise. I think there's going to be a banjo there. That'd be very cool. So just to test that, this is my little ploy to get someone to subscribe. Just to test that, go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel right now and see if that happens. Who knows? Okay. Have you looked at breaks for those slow songs? Sitting Alone in the Moonlight, Rolls Don't Know. Yeah, so the roll, that's the deal. Playing a break on a slow song. If I was going to play a roll on like Sitting Alone in the Moonlight at the speed people usually do it. That kind of thing, If I did that, if I was going to play like a rolling solo behind that. That actually kind of could be kind of cool. But anyway, the roll thing doesn't work with that most of the time. So what you actually want to do is you want to play the same stuff you're playing as backup, but louder, and accenting the melody. So, for instance, for like Sitting Alone in the Moonlight, let's say Sitting Alone in the Moonlight, my backup is like this. Right? That's all well and good, but I actually want to play the melody now, because you can do the same thing, just accent the notes of the melody in the highest voice of the chord. So, sail alone in the moonlight. Something kind of like that. Let's try that again. Something kind of like that. Something like that. Hopefully better than that. But does resubbing count? I don't know if resub. I mean, yeah, I think it would. If you unsubscribe and then resubscribe, it will probably do that. But make sure you resubscribe. Don't. The subscriber thing is funny because it's good for getting people to know when I'm posting stuff. It's never going to amount to the millions that it's like a whole different ball game with the YouTube world. Okay. John Mathis says, one local teacher would assign me transcriptions from the Scruggs book. I did a year at the Trishka Banjo School online. He had more material geared towards a beginning player. How do I teach? How do I teach? Good question. If we're doing like a Skype lesson or something, we talk about whatever it is you're interested in. I'm, as of right now, not necessarily the best teacher for saying, I was going to say I'm not best for the kind of student who wants kind of a lesson plan and say, here's the path that I have devised for someone who wants to get from here to there. Because there's just too many paths. There's too many, I don't want to put anybody on a path towards something that they're not interested in, or, some people need faster, slower, all this stuff. So it's more like, if we were to do a lesson, it's more like, here's what I want to be able to do. And then I say, here's how you get there, because I probably know how to get there, even if it takes a long time, Even if you're a beginner and you want to be really advanced, you want to be like a professional, that's fine too. And if you just want to like play this song, then we can get you there. So it's more like for the self-motivated, self-directed students who have a certain goal in mind, I can get you to that goal. That's what I'm confident in doing. I can probably do other things, but that's really the only thing that I'm confident in just saying I can do that. So I don't want to overpromise anything. What's a good software for recording and overlaying different instrument tracks, making songs? Always wanted to play around and make some songs. So if depending on what kind of gear you have, if you're using like an Apple laptop or an Apple product or something, GarageBand is actually way better than people give it credit for in terms of recording. It's especially in the last couple of years. I've never used it that much because I just don't have Apple stuff. But every time I've seen it on somebody else's Apple computer, it's been way better every time they update it. And so it's kind of like just a simple recording workstation, and you can get some good sounds out of it if you got a decent microphone and a decent way to connect that microphone to the computer. Then you can get some good sounds out of it, and it's easier to use than most things. So I would say start there if you've got the capability to do Apple products. If not, it's tough to say. I use Adobe Audition, but that's just for like the videos and stuff. I don't really actually record like multi-track stuff. You know, I don't really record music myself. I'll think about that because there's probably an answer somewhere in my brain, but I'm not sure. Yeah, that's what I got for you, unfortunately, at the moment. Reminds me of Bully the Town. Yeah, Bully the Town is a great tune as well. That's kind of what that tune is. It's like the 3/4 slow version of it. Something like that. I used to know that tune very well. Obviously, not anymore. Dean says, I'm a high school teacher and I have a student who's crazy on guitar, 14-year-old Tony Rice. Any advice? He's way out of my league. Like advice to play, like to jam with him, like to keep up because he's so good, or I think even if that's not what this question is exactly, the idea of trying to keep up with somebody, the idea of trying to get to a certain level because you want to play with certain people at a certain jam, or you want to get in a band or whatever it is, a lot of the time comes down to like one or two things. The first one being the stuff that for his future. Okay, well, I'll talk about this anyway, as if you would ask this question, even though it turns out you did not ask this question. I will talk about it anyway. It comes down to making sure you're playing the things that you want to play. And I don't mean like choosing the right stuff to play. I mean like if you learn a tune, actually play the notes in the tune. Like, if you want to play 9-Pound Hammer, make sure that if that's the way you're going to play it, you're actually going to play all those notes. I meet a lot of people who play, and when they play something that they claim to know, it actually comes out a little bit jumbled. You're missing notes here and there. It's not really any particular version. It's just kind of like rolls over whatever it is. And it's like that's a part of the continuum of practicing all this stuff. But really take the time to learn each note of that you want to play and make sure that it really comes out one at a time in time. And then after that, it's really just about getting it up to speed to, that's, in a large sense, that's really the only two components of all this stuff is once you have an idea of what you want to play that thing, and really learn it correctly. You don't have to play it the same every time, but whether it's playing a specific version of something or whether it's um, improvising, don't don't allow yourself not to play um, something that you like. You can make mistakes, but make sure that the goal that you have doesn't include all the mistakes all the time. Um, you know, don't be too hard on yourself, but be honest with yourself and say, is that really what I would prefer to play? Like, is that the way that I want to do this? Or when I go practice, do I need to go work on that thing because it's missing this note and I always screw this up and whatever. Anyway, for whatever that's worth. Um, let's see. For his future, I want to steer him in the right direction as a mentor. Oh, well, you know, I think if you're talking about in the right, if you mean in the right directions, like what to do with his life, maybe that's what you mean, or maybe you mean musically. I guess maybe you mean musically. I don't know if I'm the one to ask about the anything else. Um, so I think I don't know if he's got any problems. Usually if you have to steer somebody in a certain direction, it's because there's an issue of some kind. Um, I think one thing I noticed with really young players that are pretty good is that um, they're they're maybe not aware of how methodical you can be with practicing, or they're maybe not aware of um, how much further you can take something before you're kind of done practicing it. And I don't want to get into any position of telling somebody who's just having fun playing guitar, like, hey, take this more seriously. Because you should only take it as seriously as you really want to. But let's just say you identify as someone who takes it very seriously. Um, you then want to see how far you can take that, which really, let's say you really like Tony Rice, you like Billy Strings. Yeah, like a lot of young guitar players really like Billy Strings and Tony Rice, and that's kind of it for the moment. That's fine. Um, and so they'll learn the break, but then they'll learn the break or they'll learn licks or something like that. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Is like it's just not as comprehensive. The learning is not as comprehensive as it could be, because as far as like other 14-year-olds are concerned, you're doing great. You sound awesome. You're the only 14-year-old that can play Tony Rice licks. Um, but so I think maybe the main thing I would kind of suggest is just encourage a young student like that to be meticulous about it. Don't accept the mediocre kind of playing uh, uh, that happens when we're not trying. Not that this person is mediocre in any way, but that happens when we're not really putting in the full effort. Which is to say, again, it's fine if you make mistakes, all this stuff. Um, but you want to be careful. You want to be careful that just because you're 14 and just because you sound great compared to other 14-year-olds doesn't mean you're actually not capable of a lot more. I hope this doesn't come off as implying that somebody needs to work harder or something. I know when I was that age and I was playing guitar and there weren't a lot of people playing guitar, it felt like, well, I'm doing great because nobody else can do what I do, so I must be doing great. But then you go on YouTube and you watch some 14-year-old that's better than I'll ever be. There's some really great kids out there on every instrument. And it's not a competition. It's just you watch that and you say, oh wow, actually, when I was 14, I could have gotten a lot better. I could have practiced a lot more, or actually just practiced a lot better. I could have learned things better. I could have, all these things. So maybe just make somebody aware of what's possible and say maybe reach for that. Otherwise, you might later regret it and say, I thought I could just hang out and play what I'm already playing because nobody else at my school can do it. That's what I remember feeling like anyway. Um, okay, we're a little backed up here. Okay, how do you get into playing straight jazz on the banjo? It sounds totally unapproachable. It kind of is unapproachable. It's not it's not impossible, but it's definitely not. It's not like there's a lot of people out there that do it and have great ways of describing how to do it. I played guitar for a long time, jazz guitar, and that was kind of my introduction to all this stuff. So I actually, everything I play on banjo, jazz-wise, is kind of something I transferred from guitar, which is very helpful because there's actually a lot of resources for guitar. There's a lot of, I studied that for a long time, and then you go to the banjo, and it's a similar tuning, so you can actually get away with a lot of the same stuff. Um, um, but if you want to get into it now and you haven't played guitar and you don't have that background and whatever, if you want to just, you are who you are and you want to play jazz banjo, Ryan Kavanagh is a great resource for that. I don't know if he has like video lessons out, but he definitely does Skype lessons, and he'll get you on that path probably better than anyone will. But you can kind of do like a homemade version of that. The things you need to know to learn jazz are some music theory. You just need to know what chords belong in what key, what scales go with what chords. That's kind of it. There's not really much more than that. I mean, you can learn a lot more and make it a lot more complicated to that, and in some ways that can be helpful, but just to get into it, just learn what scales go with what chords, really, and then learn the scales all over the neck, which is not impossible, but might take some time, if you want to play basically major minor scales all over the neck. It takes a while, but it's actually, I don't know. It's in the grand scheme of what you could be learning. It's way easier than memorizing like all the digits of pi, because that's never ending, or learning to code or something like that is probably way harder. Once you do that, all you need to do is learn what the tendencies of jazz musicians are with those scales. So, for instance, it's a common habit to land on like the third or the seventh of each chord as you're going past the chords. So if I was going to do E minor, A7 to D, right, which is just 2, 5, 1, common progression, I'm going to hit the third of the E minor as I go down the scale. That's the third of the A chord. It's a third of the D chord. It's just the third of each chord. So that's one of the tendencies of jazz musicians. It's all the same chord. It's all the same scales. There are other scales to learn, but for the most part, with the major scale, you can do all these things. And so let's say you know the scales on the fretboard. You know what scales go with the chords. Then if you find really any sort of resource that's explaining how to use those scales, like, how to play bebop by, what's his name? David Baker, or something like that. There's these resources that actually just kind of explain, like, here's a pattern using this scale on this chord, and it'll make it sound like jazz. It's a little simplified, but that's kind of the deal. And so once you know the scales, you know the music theory, you actually don't need to find like a banjo jazz book. You need to find any kind of jazz resource, and you can adapt that to the banjo. Because as of right now, there's not good resources for jazz banjo in the single string world. Not really. Melodic is a whole other thing that I can't really get into because I just don't understand it well enough to improvise in different keys. I can kind of do like the licks that you hear on fiddle tunes, but I couldn't do, you know what I mean? Can't play in A flat with a melodic scale. unless I'm using a capo, I guess. Okay, so oh yeah, and Finn, actually with Audition, you can use Audition for that stuff. Definitely go on YouTube and find tutorials for how to do all that stuff. I haven't done it with that, but I know that people do it all the time, so I know that and that's how I learned to do any video stuff or any whatever is all just tutorials on YouTube. It can be kind of frustrating at first, but if you do that, you'll definitely have some good luck. Um, let's see. How often are you forced to get frets replaced? When I finally got my Plus Super Christmas heavy. Jeff, I wonder how frequently is that? You might be fretting a little too hard. That's possible. Um, you really don't have to. I'm not really putting that much force down on the thing. You know what I mean? It's more across the neck. But the other thing is try stainless steel frets. I've had stainless steel frets on for maybe almost 2 years, and I don't see really any sign of wear on them. And I play this banjo all the time, so that's something to get into. That's an idea. Um, let's see. I want to start a bluegrass jam in a local music store here. What should I do to start? Well, you should probably ask them if they're interested first. Maybe you've already done that. Um, I think the key to starting any kind of jam or community event related to bluegrass um, is usually, if you got to think about what people are looking at these days to find out what information they want to learn. Putting up signs can be helpful if people look at signs in certain places. But actually, these days, it's much more likely to have success if you were to post on Facebook in some way. So maybe there's, for instance, in Maine, there's a Bluegrass Association of Maine. I know they have one in California. They've got a bunch of states that have Bluegrass Association of whatever state. And even if it's not a huge organization, if you've got like a couple hundred people that are members of that Facebook group, then if you post that event, you make a Facebook event for that jam, put that on the group page, then people can see it and get involved. You know, start by talking to some people personally. Also, get try see if you can find one whole bluegrass band's worth of people that can definitely show up to that jam. People get guitar, banjo, mandolin, bass, fiddle, dobro, whatever, at least one of those instruments, and just call them up and say, hey, I'm starting this jam. Can you be there for this entire jam? You'll be like my guaranteed guitar player, my guaranteed mandolin player, whatever. And so that at least like you'll have that whole band, and then maybe two people show up other than that, but it's still a great jam because you've got that whole band. And maybe a ton of people show up, and once in a while, or after a while, you have it get to the point where you don't need to guarantee that anyone's going to be there, and then it just is fine. But doing something like that can actually make it'll be fun, even if the only people that show up are the 4 people that you called specifically and said, hey, please show up at this time. I'm asking you to do this. Not, hey, if you want to come by and we're having this jam, say like, hey, can you do me a favor? Do you want to be in the house band? And give them $20 or something like that. That can be kind of a good idea, I think. And this gets into the idea of community, like the bluegrass community. Here's, the thing that makes the bluegrass community grow and work is when people actually put things into it. So by starting a jam, you're putting something into it. That's great. You have to decide to what extent some of this stuff is worth it to you. If you want to, the more you put into it, the more it's going to help the community. But at a certain point, it probably becomes more work than it's worth, and probably more time is spent than is worth the money you're making, which may be $0 and probably is if you're just starting a bluegrass jam. So you have to decide how much time you have in your life. But what I mean by all that is that things like starting a jam is building the community. When you have that jam, by getting other people to invest their time and take it seriously, like asking those 4 or 5 people to come to the jam, they might not otherwise want to do it, but if they see it as like, I'm investing my time so that the bluegrass community grows, all that stuff, that's very helpful. You spending the time to go around and advertising on Facebook, that kind of thing. That's all very very helpful. So I think that might be a way to go. Um, I think, and then what's nice is you put in that effort up front, maybe for a week or 2 weeks or a couple weeks, whatever you're going to do. And I think weekly is good. Monthly is fine, but if you do it weekly, I think people get more excited about things over the course of a week. It's like, cool, I did this. Now I have a week to prepare to get ready for the next jam or whatever. If it's a month, it's kind of like sneaks up on you. It's like, oh wow, month has gone by and I have to go to the jam. Maybe not. I haven't really been practicing. Whatever. Yeah. So there's that. If that's helpful. When you're playing those scales, are you always alternating between thumb and index or straight thumbing? Oh, yes, thumb and index is often the thing. Bluesy licks in the F position. So like, yeah, this kind of thing. That kind of stuff is always thumb index. The way Crow did it, anyway. Noticeable fret wear after 6 months. Oh, and Finn also says worn pretty bad. Yeah, I don't know anything about fret metal really, other than the fact that stainless steel like does not wear really at all. But there might be some frets that really are prone to wearing like that. It wouldn't surprise me if on cheaper banjos it has cheaper frets. That kind of makes sense. Whatever they're made of, who knows? So stainless steel is a good way to go. But I would talk to a luthier of some kind about that because they would know better. Kelly wants tips for learning tunes that have no banjo. So assuming it kind of there's assuming you know what the chords are to the song, you kind of get to decide what the banjo does. For me, since I play for the most part just bluegrass, if I hear a bluegrass song that has a banjo, I kind of know what to do. It's kind of the same old bluegrass stuff. Whatever the song is. So as long as you have an idea of what you usually do on a given song, then that's probably what I would do. As far as like some song that doesn't have a banjo and it's not really bluegrass, it's just kind of like a pop song or something like that. On something like that isn't bluegrass, it kind of does actually work to just play a set roll through the chords. Somebody wanted to learn Angel from Montgomery, the John Prine song. Add a G, so it's just G and C for that first part. Something like that, where it's just one roll. It's just that index finger, 2 forward rolls, or maybe you just do the alternating roll. Just pick that one roll and just figure out what the chords are and apply that roll to it and see what you like. Try different rolls, that kind of thing. I think that's kind of what I would say for that. Let's see. What advice do you have for making single string sound more connected like Keith style? So there's one important thing that's going to make single string playing kind of smoother between the transitions, and that's playing each note as long as you possibly can before going to the next note. So what I mean is this: if I play just these 2 notes, if I don't let this note ring as long as possible before going to the next one, it sounds like. And if I were to play a scale that way, then you can tell that is definitely single string, that is definitely not anything else, and it sounds kind of choppy. But if I can practice making that note last as long as possible, and then practice the scale that way, still sounds like single string, but it's a lot smoother. Someone like Ryan Kavanaugh is really great at that, and Noam Pakelny, Bela Fleck, all those people are really great at that because they've specifically practiced that, and it takes a long time to get that, and you have to practice it slowly at first. So just practice that scale. Oop. You know what I mean? So you gotta really keep those notes as long as possible. That first note should stop at the exact moment that the next note starts. What does that mean? The first note should end at the exact moment that the next note starts. You know, and that's coordination between these two hands, as opposed to your other two hands. Give me your top 5 banjo pickers of all time. In your humble opinion, who are your favorites? Well, the people I listen to most, so I guess that's my favorite: Earl Scruggs, J.D. Crowe, Ron Stewart. I have 2 more. That's not enough. Probably Noam Pakelny, and I'm probably forgetting someone. I mean, I'm forgetting everyone. There's way more than 5 for sure. Jason Davis. Yeah, those are probably my 5 for people I actually listen to the most or have spent the most time trying to emulate. But there's many, many, many more people that I also enjoy. Approach for transcription, like how-to guide. So maybe I'll do a video on this at some point, but you know, assuming your ear is to the point where you can kind of pick things out by ear, you know, for instance, if you hear this kind of thing, assuming you can pick out the notes in that by slowing down the recording or whatever, then all I do is I go very slowly through a recording, note by note, at like half speed, and I just pick out each little note. And I usually will just learn something in its entirety first by playing it, and then I'll write it down later. If it's just for me, then I don't usually write it down, but if I'm going to put it online, then I'll write it down, obviously. But for me, I like to get through something and be able to play it at the end, because if I just immediately put it on the tablature, then I actually have to go back and look at the tab to relearn it, because so it's a little more challenging because you have to keep all the information in your head, but I actually think that's a good thing. That's what we're looking for as players. If I was just learning something to tab it out, I would probably just do that. It's way faster. But the actual learning it takes a way longer. And so there's a video on learning things by ear that's on YouTube that I have that you can check out also that might be helpful for that sort of thing. But it really all comes down to, at the very end of the day, just having the patience to really look at one or two notes at a time and just figure out what they are. And you just listen to the same note over and over again. You know, if it's this note, you know, let's say you're learning this. You just want to hear that first note over and over again. Hit play and stop it before it gets to the next note. Rewind a little bit. Same thing. And then try to find out on your instrument, you know, once you can really hear it. And it's really slow at first, but then as time goes on, it actually gets way, way faster. And it gets a lot easier. So that's good. Okay. How much melodic style improvising do you do versus playing an arrangement? I can come up with a decent version of a fiddle tune. Yeah, so the deal... wait a minute. Decent version of fiddle tune, but I find it hard to break out of that in jams. Yeah, that's really hard to do. And I'm going to do a video about melodic stuff soon that kind of gets into why that's challenging. But I'm sure we all have experienced this where you can learn your arrangement of a tune, you know, whatever it is. But then it's hard to improvise. Like, how do I break out of that little thing? Because if I miss one note, right? It's kind of the same thing as if I just make a mistake, you know. Where do I get back in? How do I get back into that stream of notes? Whatever. That's really hard to do with the melodic thing, because you don't instinctually immediately know exactly where the correct note is. partially because it's so unintuitive to play melodic style. You play a note here, and then to play the next note in the scale, you actually have to go to a string with a lower pitch. That actually doesn't make a lot of logical sense compared to how we look at, you go up, you go in one direction, the note gets higher. Same on a piano, whatever. And if you go this direction, if you go from a lower string to a higher string, generally you're going to get a higher pitch note. Not true with melodic style. That's why it's so difficult to do that with. But it doesn't mean it can't happen. Just because it's not logical doesn't mean after repetition it won't make sense. It won't make sense logically, but it'll make sense in your head in some mysterious way. That's fine. That's why it doesn't make sense that this is the G major scale to me logically. But I've done it so many times that it just happens. The reason that makes improvising difficult is because in order to get the melodic thing to really feel like something you have a choice in moving around, it has to be so familiar that you're not just playing what you've memorized, which is very hard to do. So when you ask how much melodic style improvising I do very, very little. Or if I do, it's like I do a little bit of melodic and see how quickly I can get out of it and do single string stuff. Because the single string thing logically makes a lot more sense. It's kind of like playing guitar or something like that. I can make more choices because it's just something I just have more options, and I'm more flexible because I'm more familiar with it. And I think I'm more familiar with it because it logically makes more sense, but that doesn't mean I can't be as familiar with the melodic thing. Somebody like Bill Keith or Ron Cody are that familiar, or were that familiar with the style to the point where they were really improvising. So like, let's say I was playing Whiskey Before Breakfast. I mean, even that, I had an idea. I was like, okay, well, I know this little thing works here, but how do I get out of it? And I had to pause for a second. Yeah, it's kind of... So a lot of times it comes down to like specifically having these little mini licks that you're used to, like this little shape, or just like knowing that scale and moving up and down it and everything. But if I were just going to do single string, that actually is just way easier for me to do. Yeah, so it is more like arranging, yeah, because I have the pauses in there when you're kind of making, that's when you're making choices. But think about this, that time when you're making that choice, you have to make that choice no matter what, whether or not there's a pause in between or it happens on the fly. I think getting there is really just about closing that gap, and the best way to do that is just repetition, repetition, repetition. And you're not repeating something you've already memorized. You're at an incredibly slow speed, just playing the tune over and over again, trying to make little differences here and there. So, like the way I would do it, if I wanted to play this style, and I don't particularly always want to. I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I wish I had practiced this stuff more because it'd be fun to do, but it's just not what I spend my time on. But for people who really like for No Pikelny or all these people, I would say the best way to get there would be to play the tune like as slowly as you can, so that you have more time to make these decisions. So. Yeah, sorry. Like at that slow speed, I can actually come up with something all melodic. I just go to single string. So who knows? Maybe that's helpful. Okay, we're getting down to the end of it here. I actually have to go do some recording soon. So I think Ken just asked a question. That's going to be the last question, but I'll get Dean's first, and then. So Ken's question is, unfortunately, the last question for this time. Can you speak to improvisation tips for bluegrass and bluegrass gospel? Like if you don't know the song per se, but know the chords or the progression. So obviously you want to know what the chords are. That's kind of a must have. So assuming you know the chords, but you maybe don't know the melody, you're only going to be able to play something if you have this like bag of tricks to pull from. And it doesn't have to be like interesting licks really per se. You don't have to be playing whatever, especially talking bluegrass gospel. You'd probably just want to play something close to the melody or something like that. So think about this. If I've played, let's say I learned all the breaks that J.D. Crowe played out of a G position, then I would know a bunch of things that sound like or and then when it goes to the C chord, it either goes or one of the notes in the chord, and when it goes to D, it either goes or each chord has all these notes in it. The melody usually is. And so if I've learned a bunch of songs that have a bunch of different melodies, then I have a bunch of different options to choose from. Meaning, let's say I'm playing, who knows what this song is, but let's just say I'm playing a random song that I don't know the melody to. If I've played a bunch of these different things and I have these licks in my mind because I've memorized these songs, I don't have to play what the melody of the song is necessarily if I can't figure that out, but I can play something. Let's say it's a song with the same, it's just 1, 4, 5, 1. If I've learned any song with 1, 4, 5, 1, which is a million of them, then I could play something kind of like or another version would be all that stuff is just taken directly from some other break or some other thing that I've learned, and I'm just pulling. It's just I have them all ready to go, and I'm just picking one of those things. If you don't have, if you find that you are like, okay, something for the C chord, and you don't have any options, you're not really just going to invent something that sounds great like bluegrass, probably, if you don't have the experience of playing something that sounds like bluegrass before. So if you want to be able to do that, then you want to memorize and learn a bunch of other breaks and solos for standard bluegrass songs. It's the learn by doing method, and which is not to say that you don't want to think about how to analyze some of this stuff. You don't want to, it's not like you only ever play things that you learn by, you learn in a memorized way. But if you memorize that kind of stuff, if you memorize a bunch of different breaks and solos, and you won't keep them memorized forever, you'll have them maybe like 80% memorized forever or something, or 50%, whatever the deal is. You'll have enough of that information stored that you can really use it. I've posted probably close to 100 breaks or solos or something to YouTube that I played exactly note for note, and just tab exactly that. I probably could play less than 10% of them note for note anymore. I could play probably less than half of them all the way through without being like, okay, what's the next thing? And even then it wouldn't be note for note. And just because, I spent about a week on it and then I let it go. I forgot about it. But there's so much stuff that I have remembered from that, like maybe it's just one little lick here or there, or just having the experience of playing all these different melodies and everything. That stuff sticks with you. Even if you don't have like that Blue Ridge Cabin Home solo perfectly down, whatever, you did it enough that like when a song that sounds kind of like Blue Ridge Cabin Home, like Your Love Is Like a Flower, has some similarities, then you might not need to know that one. You just need to know that it starts kind of in the same way. think that's probably the way to go about it. Sometimes people think it's kind of a waste of time to really learn and memorize these breaks and solos, but it is absolutely the easiest and fastest way to really play authentic bluegrass banjo. Not only because you're playing exactly what Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe played, but it's actually the fastest way to get to making those choices yourself. If I never learned any bluegrass banjo solos or breaks, it wouldn't occur to me to play anything that sounds like bluegrass. But if I have all that language, then I have all those options to choose from. And I might never ever want to play note for note something that Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe plays in public. Maybe it's just a practice technique. That's great. When I go on stage and play these songs, I don't play what Crowe or Earl played. I play just whatever I play. But it comes from all those things. And so if you like Earl Scruggs, learn those. If you like Bill Keith, learn those ones. And you're going to be a combination of all those influences. So I think that's the way to go with that. All right, one more question. This is from Ken. I'm studying some classical pieces, and I'm having terrible time memorizing them. Long pieces, no repeats, and difficult left-hand positions. So this actually dovetails quite nicely. It's funny. Richard says all the really good stuff by Earl J.D. are never taught. Usually get the easy stuff from teachers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and no disrespect to any other teachers out there who aren't talking about what the old master banjo players did. But if you learn stuff that if the only arrangement of tunes you learn are things that you'll probably never hear Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe play, I'm just using those two as an example, but it could be anyone, then you're never going to sound like Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe, which is fine for some people. Some people say, well, I don't want to sound too much like Earl Scruggs or J.D. Crowe. Well, don't worry, because it's never going to happen, even if you really want to. I spent a lot of time playing exactly what J.D. Crowe played just to practice it, and I don't sound like J.D. Crowe. I sound like someone who listens to J.D. Crowe, and that's how it should be. Ron Stewart has done more homework than anyone trying to sound like J.D. Crowe, not because he wants to sound like J.D. Crowe, but that's because that's the music he loved. And even him, it's amazing what he's done. It still sounds like Ron Stewart. You can't escape it. So that's not the point anyway. But yeah, beware of any educational materials that don't put you in the direction of the thing that you want to do. I'm not saying anything about my materials being like better quality, but they point people in the direction that I want to go. I talk about the things that I like learning about, like J.D. Crowe and Earl Scruggs, and learning how to be a real bluegrass banjo player. So for people who are interested in that, it's perfect. Some people actually don't want to learn stuff like that. Some people want to learn how to play banjo with pop songs. I don't really do a lot of that. Some people want to play like Christmas songs. I don't really do anything like that. There's a lot of different ways to do all this stuff. And so if it matters to you that you play like the bluegrass banjo players that you like, then you have to actually look at the stuff that they recorded. If you want to learn, let's just say it as an example. Here's something that happens all the time. The tune "Boil 'Em Cabbage Down." Obviously, that's not really the melody. I can't help it. But a lot of times with students, I will start them off on an easy version of that. Whatever. And then slowly get into more and more bluegrass. Hey, we just got the sub notification. That's great. It worked. All right. T-Bone. What's up, T-Bone? Okay. So it's great to learn stuff like that, something that sounds like this. That's great. It's a good way to learn the chord shapes, practice the rolls, all this stuff. But that is not, I would not consider that really bluegrass banjo. That's not something Earl Scruggs would play. That's not something J.D. Crowe would play. It's not something any of these people would really play. They're going to play something like this. have to play it that complicated either. This was still bluegrass banjo. You know, that still is. But so if you find yourself learning, arrangements that look a little bit more like just rolls than the complicated language that is bluegrass. You know, if you look at like Earl Scruggs tabs, it kind of looks like a mess because it's not one roll through the whole thing. It's a bunch of different stuff. That's what makes it sound like bluegrass. So just beware of, if you want to sound like bluegrass, make sure you're studying material that is bluegrass. And if you're not there yet, if you're still doing the stuff that's like that pre-bluegrass, just learning the banjo basics, that's great. But make sure that you're kind of moving towards the direction of really learning bluegrass. Because there's a difference. You know, if you listen to banjo in non-bluegrass songs, like in country songs sometimes, or in pop songs, it's banjo, but it's not bluegrass. It's not related to what Earl Scruggs did, other than the fact that they might be using finger picks, which is not a thing about the quality. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. None of this is good or bad. There's nothing bad about this. There's nothing better or worse about that than bluegrass. It's just that it isn't similar to what Earl Scruggs did. So it's not gonna, you play that with a band, it's not gonna sound anything like what Earl Scruggs did. It's and if Earl Scruggs gave you a certain feeling and you said, "Ooh, I want to be able to do that," then by emulating what he does, you might give someone else that feeling. That's passing that thing on. So, anyway, what was I talking about? Memorizing. All right. Hopefully, I can get this in a little bit more of a timely manner. I've been going long on all these questions. Okay. So, memorizing things. Memorizing something takes a really long time, and it takes as long as it takes. So, what does that mean? Let's say I want to play. I don't know any classical pieces, so I can't speak to that per se. But it's kind of the same thing. Like yesterday, I posted a version of "Shuckin' the Corn" for all those Scott Vestal licks in that video. That's 4 times through the entire tune, and I played it exactly one way the whole time, meaning that every time I did a take, I knew exactly what every note was going to be. There's a lot of notes. Just that has a ton of notes in it. But think about that like 4 times longer than that. And if I were to just from scratch try to memorize that, it's going to go bit by bit. Let's say measure by measure or half a measure by half a measure. So how's that start? I'm not going to touch, if I'm trying to memorize it, I'm not going to touch another note until I get that by memory. Great. And then let's say, let's do the next measure. And do just the next measure. Just do that. Just that until you have it memorized. Until you can do that without looking at it. Right? And then you're going to combine the first and the second measure. And that's it. You're just going to keep doing just that until you have that memorized. Then you're going to do the third measure. And do just that until you have that memorized. And then you're going to play the first 3 measures, right? So you see how we're doing this? We're just kind of building slowly on each one. What happens, though, is you might be fine going through this process and learning stuff and memorizing it. And over the course of like an hour, you memorize a big chunk of it and you can play it all, whatever. And then you come back the next day and you don't really remember it that well anymore. That's fine. That's kind of just how it works. That's how the human brain works. That's how all this stuff works. That's not unique to any one person. That's just how it is. So you kind of have to do exactly the same thing over again. But it's going to take way less time because you've actually already done all of it. So you don't need to, it's not going to take as much time to get there, but you want to do the same process. You still don't want to skip anything because let's say I play this tune and I play the first 4 measures. Just that. And I mostly remember it, but it's like... and then I can can keep going, right? Like maybe there's got that one measure in there that's a little funky, but everything else is cool. Um, it really comes down to whether or not you're going to be honest with whether or not you memorized it. It's kind of like going to the gym. Let's say you wanted to go to the gym and lift weights or something, and you want to use good form. You want to be, you don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to be like swinging everything around. You want to just like, doing like dumbbell curls, and all you got to do for that, right, is just move your arm. It's just the bicep. You don't have to. You ever see people in the gym? They kind of just like sway back and forth and doing all this stuff, right? All these other muscles. Well, what's the point of the bicep curl? We're just doing the bicep thing, right? Obviously, I'm a gym expert, as you can tell. I'm super muscular. But the point is, it's just that. There's other muscles involved, but we don't actually need to use our entire body. But if we do, then it actually gets easier, right? We can cheat. But then we're not really targeting that muscle. So why are we even doing that exercise if we're not willing to just be honest and say, like, if I need to swing my entire body just to lift this weight, then I need to use a lighter weight, right? Like pick the weight that you can actually do perfect form, just up and down without everything else happening, right? It's the same thing with this. If you're trying to memorize it and you're getting to the point where it's like, well, I can play most of it, but I actually just have to kind of look at it for this section, or I forget, and then it takes me a while and I have to pause. I can't play it straight through all the time. But it's just that one measure, so it's not that big deal. It's like the goal was to memorize it, right? So don't bother with playing it all the way through if one of those things isn't memorized. Especially if it's just one of those little measures, then it won't take you long to get there. Just focus on that. So a lot of it it comes down to using the right process, which is just take a little chunk and then the next chunk and then combine them. Just do one next little chunk and then combine all of those, and then just add a little bit by little bit, and be prepared for when it gets when you have to do the whole thing over the next day or the next day or the next day. It might take a long time. But each time you do it, it gets faster. And each thing you memorize, you get better at memorizing things. Especially if, for instance, you learn a bunch of bluegrass stuff, then, if I learn a bunch of things that go... if I learn a bunch of stuff that sounds kind of like that, then memorizing the next thing that sounds kind of like that is not going to be that hard. It's actually, I kind of already know the language. So there's that. And with classical music, depending on if you learn a bunch of Bach stuff, then actually that could be easier because a lot of Bach music has these similarities, or Mozart, or any of these things. Anyone you learn has these kind of like signature things they do that are worth learning. Yeah. Okay, so we have reached the conclusion of this live stream, more or less. Let's see. The tea is completely cold. All right, so it must be over. But here's the deal. If you want to watch this entire live stream, which has been like, an hour and a half almost. If you want to watch this entire thing again, if you go to patreon.com, up here, right, /Eli Gilbert Banjo, then you can subscribe on Patreon for a couple bucks a month. You get all kinds of stuff. You get, for instance, for $1, you get all the tabs for all the videos that I post. And if you do $3, you get an extra practice tip video. If you do $5, then you can watch this live stream anytime you want. And there's other live streams that are up there, so you can go through old ones as well. So there's a bunch of benefits, and you can do that sort of thing. And I will say it makes making these videos and doing all this stuff a lot easier. I do have other teaching jobs and other performing jobs and all kinds of stuff. So, look, I'm making a living, but it makes it a lot easier to spend all this time doing this if I get support from people. But if not, that's cool too, because I would do this for free. It doesn't matter. I guess I'd be doing it no matter what. What else? Oh, yeah. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to be notified when I post other videos. And if you like this video, that's helpful. If you turn on the little notification bell, that's useful. All this stuff is useful. Anything that you're doing on this video or on all my pages, all this stuff, it's all very helpful because it at least lets me know that people are paying attention, and it also lets me know if I'm focusing on the things people are interested in. Because it turns out I'm going to talk about things that I care about the most, and hopefully there's an audience there that wants to know about those things. But here and there, I'm also happy to stretch my own knowledge and say, I think I can talk about this thing this person wants to learn about. Even though it's not my favorite thing, I think I know enough about it that I can talk about that. So I also like to hear about what people want to learn about. So this has been very fun. I think I might do this once a week on Saturdays, perhaps. I think that's what's going to be. So maybe Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, unless that's really unpleasant for anybody. Um, we'll have to see. We'll have to test a couple different things. So anyway, thank you very much for watching.